Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Biggening Corporation. We are on episode 27, and unfortunately I will definitely say that we left things yesterday in a place where we power coded through a bunch of smaller infrastructure things that needed to happen, and our purchasing bots are doing a lot of things that were smarter, but our list for today, for the first time, remains the same as yesterday. We really needed the objectives yesterday done, so only getting halfway through what we were trying to accomplish with the both sides of those bots, we really got to get them done. So I've gone ahead and moved back our purchase and sales bots to today's episode, sad to say. But the good news is that I did spend just a few minutes before starting to stream today to try to figure out where we were going wrong. At the very tail end of the episode yesterday, we went a little long to attempt to get our purchasing bot to pay attention to the reorder level that the player sets on the item card, and we were running into problems. Our purchasing bot was doing nothing, which that certainly doesn't meet the need. As it turns out, it was something small. It was a copy and paste failure. Brilliant. There are so many dangers in copying and pasting, and that's what happened to us. We have up here a bunch of logic that says if the assignment code does not equal blank, then stuff needs to happen. The bot is assigned. Code from here, we copied it on down into our any orders needed function right at the tippity top, and we said if the bot is assigned, then exit, bail out. Well, it's only going to get here if there is something assigned. That was backwards. We needed it to be straight up equal. If it is somehow getting here and not assigned, then bail out. And then because we copied and pasted this function, that bug was replicated further down here. So it was a small fix, and as a result of that, if we take a look in our activity log here and look at our more recent events, we will see that there was a pass here when I was testing, where instead of saying no orders are required for vendor V003, we didn't get any message at all, because again, we haven't updated our purchasing bot to log that behavior correctly, so no message was generated. But the good news is that a purchase order was generated for that supplier. And the other good news, when we look here, is that so far only one order has been generated for this vendor. We've got two purchasing bots assigned to this vendor, and as soon as that first line was created for our, it actually was simple circuits was the description for 1004, not plastic parts, so that is fixed. As soon as the quantity of 14 was on there, that item now had incoming stock that met our criteria of don't reorder anymore. So when we take a look here at our item card, our reorder level is 10, and we have 14 inbound. With that in mind, the purchasing bots are now correctly going, we don't want to order anything, the reordering level is 10. Now if we bump that up to 50, and we bump our game day up, we should be seeing some good action from our purchasing bot friends. Again, no real information about what they're doing is going to pop out, because we don't have any activity logging going on currently with the reworked code, but we should see a purchase order happen. And hopefully by the time we get there in sort, we'll see that. Okay, so not quite yet. It can take up to a minute. So yeah, that's pretty good. And that got us the fix that we needed, and we can close the comparative. And right now we are just getting what is needed, and again we're doing a randomization functionality to drive what quantity is going to be ordered, so we do need to fix that. That should not be random, and that should be driven based on the purchase bot. So if we look, now we've got 3 new orders that have all come in for that vendor that were not here before as our new game date, the 29th there, and we should see that it's creating a variety of stock orders for that, which is good. That's much better. Great. And we told them that once you get below 50, order more. And we've got all of the orders hard-coded to be 10 plus some random amount, so as soon as it went over that 50 point, they stopped placing orders. Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so the player now has some ability to control the reorder level, and again, this is per location, so we will probably at some point need to update the tooltip on this to be clearer about that. So if we had multiple vendors for this item across multiple locations, each of those locations where this vendor is a supplier for that, it would trigger reordering to make sure there are 50 on hand for that location. And being able to set per location inventory balances per item is going to be something that we are going to save for probably a higher version, to be honest. Great. So now, as for the quantity fix, which is the last piece to make this purchase bot at least vaguely resemble configured correctly and working at our most basic level, let's see, we've got a few settings, but that's all about the prospect base max orders and prospect max quantity. And if we go look at the vendor that we created yesterday as part of that testing workflow, distributed Oscar, we'll see that prospect, for whatever reason, that didn't convert those values correctly over to the vendor. So we might need to just do a quick little stop into our prospect table, which is a company table down here, and see what's the story with that. Okay, so here we've got all of the vendor assignment where we're converting something to a vendor. There is no code that is going to bring along the maximum orders and maximum quantity and all that sort of setting. So we should get that updated. So max orders per day equals game setup. Ooh, look at that. We don't even have game setup as a variable in here. It's terrible. I mean, we have some to-dos around game setup to do with posting groups, but we don't even have those setup fields to pull from yet, so it makes sense that we're not doing that right this second. Oh, we don't need to pull this from game setup. What am I thinking? This is coming from the prospect, which is rec dot max orders per day. We don't need game setup as a variable yet, and CodeCop will warn us that those are unused variables. Again, I don't have CodeCop turned on because of interest of just trying to go faster at the moment, and fixing CodeCop warnings is not the most exciting stream content in the world. Let's see, max quantity per order. Great. Okay, so we've got that, and then over in our bot instance, we have a few different pieces. We've got operations per day, we have maximum document lines per operation, and I think those are the only real fields that we've got on this. So I guess the question would be, is in our purchasing, when we execute on a purchase order, we need some of those simple circuits. What drives the quantity that this bot is capable of purchasing on a per order basis? And we've got the max quantity per day. Should that really be per day? That'll take some elaborate fixing, actually, because a maximum quantity per day means we're going to have to do some cross-checking and watch for totals of purchase order on a given day across all items for that vendor, so that's a little trickier. And did we have anything in our bot tier logic that says what quantity we should be ordering on a given item? I don't know that we do. So in our bot template, maximum document lines, but that's it. Okay. So we don't really have anything to base our quantity off of other than a vendor per game day purchasing ceiling, and that's kind of it. The operations per day on the bot is going to simply drive how many purchase orders they're capable of. Well, when we get into we are a little bit looking at this and going, what do we want to have happen? The thing to do is to go back to what did we write in our story? What was the sensible approach we took? Sensible. That's optimistic, isn't it? What was the theory behind the way purchasing should work? And this is why we go back to it, because check this out. There can only be one incoming shipment per vendor at a time. Ugh. That doesn't make sense. We may have to update that to say one incoming shipment per vendor per item. Because the theory behind this was the player will need to unlock higher tiers of bots to be able to order more items from a given supplier, whether it be more variations of items or simply more quantity. But do we really want only one incoming shipment? That kind of... Ooh. That's an ugly little mess, isn't it? How do we want to unravel this? Because we've coded ourselves down a path that suggests that it's going to be creating lots of purchase orders against a given vendor. But that's not how we envisioned it working from a game balance perspective. The idea behind this of having a ceiling, the vendor will only send one order at a time. What that will do is the player will have to have a very large array of suppliers that they can buy from, and a large array of bots that they will purchase through to those suppliers. So it becomes really important to get prospects farmed up for each type of item. So what do we want to consider the operations per day from a purchase order perspective? Do we drive that as how many items that they can have per purchase order, or do we have that work as the volume on the order? That might be the latter answer might be what we need, is to have the operations per day be the driver to what quantity of an order they can place for a given item. And we added to our bot list here. Go back to our bot list. We added the functionality for maximum document lines per operation. So what we could do is that if a purchasing bot can handle 2 different document lines per operation, that bot tier can handle 2 different items from the same supplier. And that way, slowly but surely, that scales up. And then higher quality, higher tier bots could then go ahead and order a larger number of items based on the operations per day. Okay. I think that makes sense, because then as a player you can nice and easy look at your purchasing bot and go, okay, it does 2 operations per day, it's ordering 2 items per day. Obviously that would be a terrible quantity to handle. I feel like that's gonna confuse people, because if we do 4 operations per day for the inventory basic, then that's handling 4 different documents. So we're getting a little bit of a mixed purpose message, and that might be a little bit ugly. So we may look at this and say we might need to approach just the captioning around it a little differently, based on the bot types. But I think that'll be alright, because we'll take the same parallel approach on the sales side, that the number of operations per day is how many items they will add, how many quantity of items they add to the order. That could be okay. I think that'll work. Yeah. So in our case, where we have these 4 purchasing bots, we really would want to crank that up and have it be 4 separate suppliers to spread that demand out, because based on our limitation here of 1 incoming shipment per vendor at a time, you wouldn't want to assign multiple purchasing bots to the same vendor. Okay. Alright. Yeah, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole without... We went a lot of episodes out looking at what was our purpose. So, okay. Alright. Good thing we caught that this stage. So, how much do we need to refactor? This, unfortunately, is something that definitely happens a lot in developing complex solutions, especially if you're doing it scattered, where you can't work on it for a big chunk of time each day. If you don't revisit your spec, you forget key restrictions. And you could end up building what is a very clever solution and does a decent job, but you could end up in a situation where your clever solution still doesn't fit the requirements. So unfortunately, this is a normal sort of thing that happens. So let's see. First of all, we were iterating per operations per day and creating a purchase order for each. We don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense. So we're gonna refactor. Yep, it's ugly, but we gotta do it. And this refactor will help our sales side as well. So we are getting double duty out of cleaning this up and fixing this before we go much further. So that's okay. All right, then. What we would want to do is, we still at the core level will do different approaches whether or not the bot is assigned. So let's start there. If the bot is assigned, then they will do one thing. If they're not assigned, they'll farm for prospects. So that part holds true. Then our new logic that we're going to need, our new logic is what happens inside. They're assigned. What we would first do is, for that bot, we would see if there's already a purchase order for that supplier inbound, due to be received as part of the next wave. So based on this restriction of only 1 incoming shipment per vendor at a time, then we can do that as one of our first checks and say we'll bail out if there's anything already. So purchase header, not the most exciting fix-up in the world for sure, but part of game design is also balancing, and balancing isn't always the most exciting. Purchase header, set range on document type, and we want only the orders and we only want our by from vendor number to be the rec.assignment code, and we'll also set range on the posting date, because I'm pretty sure we set the posting date to today, or defaults automatically to the work date. Just double checking which dates are getting filled in. Okay, document date is currently getting filled in. You're right. I suspect so are others, but we know for sure document date. So, and posting date. Okay, and we've got all document, posting, order, all the same date. So we'll base off document for now, I guess. We don't currently differentiate between them in the way we're writing this. Okay. Alright, so if we find any purchase headers for that supplier for this day, then we are going to set our bailout text here. String subs number, already order found message. Assignment code, and obviously we're getting an error message because I haven't created that message. I think one of the extensions I have installed would help with that, but nice thing about if you define a statement and you use a message that isn't defined, just go to your problems tab and you can see exactly how you named it. I am going to, in the very near future, spend some time going through all of the extensions and learning more about them, because I've got now, I think, 30 installed, and from the pack here, 22. Okay, so I've got 22 extensions installed, and I cannot promise that I know what all of them do. So I want to go through and see what they do. I don't know which ones are which. So, yep. Vendor number already has an order for and I want to put the work date in there. Actually, we'll say just that date. That's fine. Vendor number blah 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 already has an order for that date. Alright. Does that restriction still make sense with how we created the vendor? Max orders per day. So we coded the vendor against this idea incorrectly. So something's got to give. We either can hard code it that one incoming shipment per vendor at a time, or accept whatever setting is on the vendor card. And I actually think that most of the vendor prospects will have a low value in that incoming shipment ceiling. So I think we're going to give on this a little bit and use our vendor ceiling. And that means that we're going to change it up a little bit. That vendor number Bryant already has Bryant orders for that date. Oh, so now we need to know from the vendor what is their maximum. And we'll check and see if that's the case. So this gets changed up a little bit here, where we will also need to do vendor.get our assignment code. If vendor.max orders per day equals 0, that doesn't make sense. Let's safety check that. Vendor.max orders per day equals 1. You'll notice I'm not going to modify there. I'm just going to leave the safety check in place and just treat it as 1, but not actually change it. I'm okay with that. That's fine here. Alright, because it wouldn't make sense to fish up a prospect that has a maximum 0. Something probably would go wrong there. Okay. So now instead of is empty, if we find a number of orders per day and that is greater than the vendor max order per day, then we'll do some stuff. And this will call that, and this will call vendor dot max orders per day. Okay, and I'm gonna rename that variable down here real quick because it's not already found message, it is max orders per day reached message. That's a little better. At least that way it makes a little more sense. Okay, so if we've hit the max orders per day, we'll set a message about that, and then we'll bail out, which there's no result string from this. So if the purchasing bot is supposed to be filling orders and it can't, done. We don't have to do anything else. All right. Otherwise, then we can do our old logic here where we say, are there any orders? Okay. Are any orders? If there are not any orders needed, we'll set the message and say that vendor doesn't need to order anything based on the demand levels. And then finally, if we do need to place an order, that's when we'll go ahead and call our create PO function. Now, we're not doing this inside of an ops loop anymore, so we don't need to bracket this up because the operations per day will drive the quantity. So we can just straight call the prospect. And before we had down here a result text when things worked and a PO was created, we would spit out the PO to the activity. I feel like if we have the purchasing bot spit out the activity every time it creates a document, that'll be a little chatty, but we'll try it out for now. PO created message, sure. And we'll also pass in the vendor number because why not? And a new little message down here. Okay, cool. All right, so that makes sense there. And now we can say this cycle of operations per day, blah, 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 blah. None of that makes sense anymore. We're going to kill it off. If we need to get any of that code back for any reason whatsoever, that's why we have versioning in GitHub. We can go look at older versions. I do a check-in per episode, so I can just look for 20 some odd episodes what that version was. That's fine. All right, so yeah, we create PO. What does that do? That creates a single purchase document and passes that into the bot instance. One of the things I've noticed is that I was about to say we don't validate the location, but the location is set on the vendor, so we're okay there. We may want to add a check. Check vendor has a location before allowing, just so that way we don't forget to, the player will be reminded that they need to set a location because we can't receive it to nowhere and they can't change the document if the bot creates it wrong, so we need that. And as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, I will probably do a to-do cleanup episode, time lapse sometime in the not too distant future for small things like this that aren't going to be very interesting. I just need to add a vendor variable, do the get, validate it, give a good user message, possibly pop the vendor page open in case of need and that whatnot. So nothing exciting there. Now in the create line, here we get into an interesting thing. We talked about more complex bots would unlock the ability to have multiple items and larger volumes per order. So that gives us some interesting options here. We have the function looking at what item is needed, and based on the way that that calculates, that iterates through all the items that that vendor potentially would sell to us, to our company. If the vendor supplies 2 different items and we need a lot of it, when it calls the first time, it's going to find that first item. When it calls the second time, it's still going to find that first item. And NAV or /BC does not mind if you put the same item on the same order multiple times in base code. It has no issue with that whatsoever. So what we will get is the bots are going to automatically churn their way through the items that are required from a given supplier until they're needed, and then move automatically to the next item. So all we need to then do is we need to iterate through the maximum document lines. We've got it per operation, but we're probably going to need to have this be per order in our case, because that makes sense. So the maximum document lines per order for this one will be the number of lines that we create on a purchase order. Nice and easy. So let's do that. Let's see. We're going to need an integer on this. Right. Let's see, this is to bot instance dot max doc lines. Do begin. Okay. I am going to add another little safety check thing here. Bot instance dot max document lines equals 0. Then we want that to be 1. I prefer to, most of the time I prefer to just leave the checks in place like this and let the bad code that created the faulty data fix itself, or we'll get it fixed in the data later. I'd rather the check not do an additional modify to the instance in this case. That's fine. So here we'll, at the very least, we'll create 1, and then our quantity on here instead of this will be the maximum operations per day, and we will want to do a safety check that the quantity maximum here is not greater than the maximum quantity per day on the vendor. And I think that's the only thing we need to check for quantity checking. I want to say though, because on the items we've got our reorder level and our maximum stock. So I'm tempted for the moment to say let's just throw an event here. Before and after we validate the quantity, and we're going to add a couple of code checks later to double check that the quantity is not going over the vendor's maximum per day and that it's not going over the item's max. That logic can be evented, and that way extensions can play with it, monkey around, goof around with it. So for now, we're just going to do straight ops per day. which, as I recall now, is a function return in case we have calculations hooked onto that. Because if we peek at the definition of this, right now it's just returning operations per day, but we were going to add some eventing hooks onto this so that extensions could do things with it, including our own extension listener subscribers that will do research upgrades. So that makes sense. All right, and we have a definite to do here of right now we're doing a random cost from the vendor, somewhere between 10 to 20. So that's an issue, but that's a whole separate thing. That's one of our secondary goals. Okay, cool. Right, and now one thing that we are not doing anywhere in our code is calling the post purchase order. We had talked about it in the past that anything that has been fully received should be posted as a batch, and I for the life of me don't know what happened to that code. I don't remember. I thought we wrote it, but maybe we did not. So I'm gonna have to go through my notes, check out what happened to that. So at the moment, nothing is being posted for purchase orders, which is why our table is getting pretty huge. There is also the issue of, we don't have anything that's looking for situations that the player might put themselves in a bad configuration setup. For example, I've got... Hello? That was a little peculiar. I've got a situation here where I'm ordering a bunch of stuff for LO3, but there's no assigned bots. Nothing will ever be received there. So that could be a real problem. Something that we'll have to consider possibly throwing a warning of some sort for the player to watch out for. So I might go ahead in our create PO, not only do a location check before allowing, but also check for any logistics bots, because we could throw one of those player errors and let them know that their purchasing bot is making stuff inbound. They better assign a location logistics bot to fix that. Okay, cool. All right, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this workflow. All right, so we need to see this in action, and the way we need to see this in action is we're going to need to bump up our reorder level for the simple circuits, because right now it's already met the requirements. Okay, apparently first we are going to reload. Sure. We're also going to, at some point, need to do a pretty significant fact box tidy up, because a lot of the fact boxes that are in here right now have no value to the game design as we're currently mapping it out. They're wonderful and useful in lots of ways for a real organization. They're just not going to help us with when a player is looking for data. So it doesn't matter if they're the best fact boxes in the world, which they just well might be, since Microsoft, I think, trademarked FactBox. They just well might be the fact boxes that are best in the world, but they're not helpful to our players, so they're useless in that sense. Okay, so 60 there, and let's see if, first of all, is our job queue all healthy? We didn't break that. Excellent. And if we go to our activity log, descending, this is telling us that no orders are required. Is that based on today, or am I just being impatient? Is me being impatient? Okay. because we should see some tick over and we should be on a different date here. There it goes. Purchase order 2388, created for vendor 2387. Nice. Let's go check them out. And you'll notice that this time around we only got 2 purchase orders because that's, I believe, right now, but that order is that vendor is misconfigured, and it currently has 0 max orders per day, so it treats it as 1. I was just trying to think through the workflow there of should we have gotten 2 purchase orders. I don't think we should have. Okay, so let's see what it actually put on here. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it only put R2 because we still have just the tiny little 2 operations per day, and same for that. And those bots are configured with 0 for their maximum document lines at the level that they're at. So then the only real question is, why is it that we got 2? We really probably should have only gotten 1. And it is from 2 separate bot instances. Because I would prefer to see that this logic is working. Oh, nice and easy. If I had 3 purchasing bots assigned to this, then it would have failed and said that our maximum was reached because we did greater than equal to, greater than. And in this case, we're saying that 1, and when we do our first count, it's 0. When we do our second count, it's 1. 1 is not greater than 1, so there we go. So that is our issue. Greater than equal. Whenever you're not 100% sure your ifs are working correctly, say them out loud. Okay, so cool. That should fix that. And I think that makes much more sense from a workflow perspective and how we're going to balance our bots. So for the sake of time, I'm probably going to do a major cleanup and match on the sales order side to match things up. I don't think that's going to be too crazy of a thing for me to gloss over a little bit in a time lapse. I'm going to add a couple of before and after event throwings here on the validation, which will be the same exact thing where we're doing the on before prospect trades and after prospect trades, where we just call the function in here. Yep. So we just call our event function and we pass along some variables. So I'll do that a little bit off camera, I think, just so that way we're not going crazy watching me do the same code that I've been doing for a session and a half, because that I don't think is very interesting. So yeah, we'll time lapse it. Sounds good. So we technically are doing that, so let's call that good. Now, design structure thinking on the market prices. This one's a little bit trickier. I want to have a little bit of logic going on the flow of how are we making the price go up and down. And I think there's a lot of benefit and value to having that trend over time and be able to have that data over time of what the going prices for all items are in the system. That way we can have some fun later on playing with analytics and projections, and we can have Power BI give us like nice little AI expectations on the demand. So I think it's really cool. I don't think we have to do anything crazy for that. What I'm thinking is per day, per item, we want to know volume traded, that is plus purchased, plus sold, just overall amount of an item that moves. That way, if everyone's just doing class 1 items for a couple weeks, no big deal. We're seeing the trades. And my thinking is that we will capture the price for that date. And then at the beginning of each day, what we will do is we will look at volume increase or decrease. Did the trading volume go up or down? And that will determine the sign of the price change. So if there's more volume, then the price is going to go up. And if there's less volume, the price will go down. And I think that'll be a fine way to handle this. Now the variation, that is an interesting question. I don't think I want it to be a straight line equivalent. Like, say for example, if we have a 10% increase in trading volume, I don't want to have, that should not equal a 10% increase in price. I don't think. So I guess that's the real question of what ratio do I want. We're potentially going to be talking about maybe 20 companies of players or 100 companies of players, and if we figure 100 trades a day per company, then we're talking a couple thousand. If everyone doubles their production the next day, that's 100% increase. We wouldn't want to see 100% price increase. So let's just keep it simple for now, and we'll do a 0.1 multiplier. Volume price multiplier. So check us out. We have ourselves a new game setting, volume price multiplier. And then I think what we might do is maybe add a small amount of randomization to that. Maybe. One thing we do have to bear in mind is I do have all of the prices in here currently, and they're all decimal, but I think they're all whole values. So I'm not sure that matters. I was just thinking of whether or not we need to do rounding or whatever have you, but forget it. We won't worry about it. So that means that we need a data per company no table that is keyed on item and date. I don't think we need to differentiate any more than that. Although from a system administrative point of view, it would probably be useful from an admin perspective to also have it be keyed per company. It does mean that when we do our market calculations that we're going to have to do a calc sums across all of the company lines. But this means, for example, if someone is far and away outstripping everyone else and they're clearly way out in front on the wealth leaderboard, you could, as a system administrator, go through their historical trading volume to see if there's anything suspicious or abnormal, or if they've just managed to twig on a really good strategy. Whenever you're dealing with players, you can never underestimate how clever they are at finding loopholes. I had an experience once where there was a fantasy game we were playing, and there was a command that let you control it was a computer-based game, and you could control another character using this spell. And one of our enterprising players figured out that you could swing an axe at a person only a certain number of times per second, or whatever have you. But if you controlled another character, you could throw that axe an infinite number of times per second, and they could just chew through everything else in the entire game. Those sort of loopholes, you cannot anticipate all of them. So I think it's valuable for us to use this market trading information as a diagnostic tool to see if there's unexpected behavior. So even though it'll be additional overhead for us to do calc sums on it, I think this is going to be great. And then we will just do trades and price. Okay. This does mean that the pricing on this is something that the players don't get to control. The market's going to dictate their prices. Does that make sense? Do we have anything in our original vision about that? We do not. We don't specify that they can. We don't specify that we can't. Okay. I'm torn on whether or not that should matter. It would give the player some freedom to be able to set the prices on their items against the market price, above or below, but then we have to add logic of like the customers, spying a good deal, buy more as a result of that, which would be the expectation on the player's side. So I'm thinking that since these are theoretically meant to be like competing companies, there's a generally accepted trading price, and the cleverness comes in how you balance all the different things you're buying and selling. Can you retool your factory because now suddenly the price of plastic parts is on the floor, no one's been buying them for a while, and you swoop in and can take advantage of that and make some very expensive kits out of what are currently cheap parts. I think the finding the markets rather than the market prices is the real magic of the game as far as competitive strategies. So okay, that gives us our market price table. And I'm just going to scooch this off to the side here. Pardon one moment. And let's get that set up. This is kind of I called it as a folder, I called it master company. Arguably, it's not necessarily master company, it's intercompany, but that's fine. We'll make a new table, our 19th, no, 20th table. It's exciting. BCS, market trades. Big data. And this is going to be keyed on item number, which is a code 20, system, sure, PK. We are going to do this by date as our second. There are some interesting theories and school of thoughts of specificity should drive how you're creating your primary key. So for example, item and company aren't going to change a whole lot, but date will. And date therefore should be the last primary key field. It will make the grouping more efficient on the SQL side. There's some really complex data logic behind that, but dates also, the further down in a primary key you put them, the better. So as a result of that, we're going to do company, which I believe is a code 30 if I'm recalling from our prior episodes here, and then date. There's some really complex mechanics behind primary key design on that one, so absolutely feel free to cross-check me on that. My info could be out of date. Alrighty, so total trades, and the decimal on that is fine, and then price. Because we're doing the price calculation driven by the market, and we are going to calculate that on a daily, then all the trades for a given day will be the same price. That way we don't have to do mega tables with every individual trade and its trading price value. Since each game day is only 15 minutes of real time, I think that's fine. We don't have to worry about partial day trade value. That would be bonkers. I don't want to do that. And as usual, I like to blank 0. Most generally speaking, I think it makes the data present a little cleaner in most of the UI forms. Okay, cool. Yeah. Alright, excellent. There's our market trade table. We'll create real speedy like a new page off of it that'll just be a list, BCS market trades, just so we have access to go see the data. List, I guess. That's history. I don't know. It's fine. Alright, item, company, date, and then total trades and price. This will give us a really good cube table to build off of later. So, alright, market price, market data, blah blah blah, and this is definitely editable false. Yup, and we didn't do table relation on anything, so we should fix that real quick. And this will give me the ability to peek at the definition of company and double check. Yep, it's named text 30, not code 30, so that could have goofed us up. Most of the time it's not a problem, but it could have goofed us up. So, table relation to item. That's it. That was it. Alright, cool. So what we need to do now is anytime we post a trade of any kind, then that entry into the system needs to increment up our trade's quantity, and if the price isn't set that price. And separately, I think it would be of value for us to have a separate market prices table so we can do a really speedy lookup and just maintain that as a current price table. So let's do that. BCS market price. And that way we can also create some events off of this market price table that when it changes, it updates things elsewhere and we don't have to futz with changing anything. Okay, so off of item number, market price. Now, we will need to think about decimal 20. Talking and coding at the same time. That would have been a messy chunk of code to troubleshoot, and I would have been baffled. Okay, there we go. One of the things that this does mean is that, for example, our fabric parts, if it's got a market price of 10, what does that mean from a vendor and customer perspective? If players can't set the price, what do we consider to be acceptable margins? And I think it might be of value for us to do margin markups based on the classes. I think that makes sense. I mean, we could have some fun with this and have slightly different price markups based on product posting group and item categories. I'm thinking that we should make it feasible. Because if the player doesn't get to choose it, there has to be a markup somewhere. Otherwise, you're making no money on the deal. If we just do the price markup on the product posting group, it doesn't consider any of the operational efforts. So, for example, this could be the total cost of the raw materials plus 5%, but when we get into manufacturing, if some items only have one work center versus some items have 8 work centers, then we're going to need to be able to differentiate between those different levels of complexity. Sorry, I'm just realizing how complicated it is to take ownership over the markup logic on this. That makes me think that it does need to be per item a markup percent from the raw materials, but something that perhaps we as a system administrator can specially decide on a per item basis. So maybe I decide that because this has 2 bill of material steps, instead of being a 10% markup, it's a 12% markup or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So, thanks Windows. I didn't actually need you to do that. Alright. Then, if we go look at our item cart, items, yes. We already have a lot of built-in fields for this. So we just need to think about how we're populating some of the info on this. This suggests to me that we just update the unit price, and that's something that the player can't necessarily set, but that we will as part of the import routine. Okay. I'm just looking at this going. Because if we set the price profit calculation to be price equals cost plus profit, guess what? And Business Central is smart, and it'll handle all this for us, and it'll take into account costing logic. But guess what gets pretty complicated? Actually, that might be the way to go. Because if a player has stockpiled 1,000 plastic parts and they had them sitting in the warehouse right from the beginning for a real long time, and their value is their cost was really, really low on that, then the price of those could be against that low cost. No. Okay. Alright, we're gonna have to consider the market price logic a little bit further. We're going to have to brainstorm and workshop that a little bit. So rather than get wrapped around that particular axle right this second, we're just going to know that there is going to be an item number and market price table out there, and that these market prices are going to be set as part of our daily calculation routine based on trading volume, and that's that. And if a player stockpiles stuff and then doesn't trade them for a while, that'll change the price implications. Okay. Alright, so we'll think about that. For now, we'll not worry about it. We've created a market price, we've got the market trades, so now we need, as part of our game day, we are doing the master heartbeat here, runs, bumps the game date. Now, as part of the master heartbeat, all this little code unit is in the master company. In the job queue, we've got this routine running. So really, we should have a market calculation code unit that is a separate little job. Okay, easy enough. Calculation. Jeez. Alright, and we don't need a source table name for this because we're going to do a few things. So on our, we will probably, go figure, need our game setup, because we will need a couple of pieces of data from that, and we are going to need our we are going to create entries. Are we? No, we don't need to do it this way. What am I thinking? We will come back to having a market calculation. This will be for pricing. Okay, that sounds fine. And then this routine will also be the master of this beginning of the trade day. Ah, that's what we needed here. I was sitting here on, there was something we needed the code unit to do. But that drives right back into that, what does the market price do? So, alright, we're going to skip that for the moment. But what we do need is, we do need in the player company, when trades happen, we need to bump up those the trade quantity and note the price down if it hasn't been noted already. And the easiest way for us to do that, honestly, when the bot adds a given item to a purchase order or sales order, that feels like a reasonable intercept moment to me, to note the trade. That feels fine and safe. So let's see, we don't need that in player management, but this is in the player company. So let's add a new code unit in our player company called BCS Player Market Watch. Sure, sounds fine. And what we're going to need is, we're going to need some events from the sales line and the purchase line. And as I've learned, I can be a lot more efficient if I come to my object designer, pop into, let's start with purchasing, my purchase line, and I look at events. Pretty sure I can filter this a little smarter. I just haven't gotten the hang of doing all of the filtering on this. Oh, you know what? Let's do this on line. If we mark these two, and we say marked only, and we say events. Oh, okay. That's a shame. That would have been a handy way to do that. Okay, so let's scrunch this a little bit so that way we can see what we're dealing with. I appreciate all that extra info, but I'm not going to do it right now. So on after add item, that's probably our guy. Let's try it out. By clicking the event, we subscribe. Okay, so on sales line after add item. Alright, that might be what we need. Might be. Let's check. Okay. This is when... okay. On after add item is only called when the person on a sales order clicks the add items button and is adding multiple items to a sales order, which our bots are definitely not doing. So rather than look for the business integration events and try to dig through this and dig through this and dig through this, we know the bots are calling an insert on the line, and they are calling a validate. On after validate event, and we can just look for number. So on after validate of number, when that is all said and done, we can just work with that. That's okay. We don't need to dig through the integration events. That's all right. Okay, and we only really need the rec, so that's easy. And we will need our new BCS market trades record. BCS market trades. If not, BCS market trades dot get for the rec dot number, the item, the company name that the player is running in, and the work date that the player is running on. Then we'll insert it, and otherwise we will need to increment the amount. In that case, we'll also need to modify. So yep, we want to if end. All right, cool. So BCS market trades dot item number equals rec dot number. If this is what we're doing, company is equal to company name, and the date is equal to the work date, and market trades dot total trades is equal to yeah, we can't do it on after validative number. We're doing it after quantity because we need to know that quantity. Yeah, that makes sense. Nice thing about hooking onto the on after validate event is that we can hook onto any field, so no big deal. We'll just change which field we're pointing at. Easy enough. And dot insert true. I am not doing the price just yet because we need to figure out how we're populating the market table on the price. So that's easy. But now here, if we do get it, then the total trades is just going to go up by whatever the new quantity is. And modify. I don't have any code on insert or modify, but I'm calling true in case there's something that will trigger off of trading activity later. That potentially could be a lot of activity, so it would be bad to hook onto that, but hey, you know, in case. Yeah. Now the cool thing is that theoretically should be all peachy keen, and we can hook onto Purchase line the same way, and the procedure got named that, which is interesting. We've definitely changed this enough that I don't think that's the procedure name I would call it. Sales line. Let's validate quantity. There we go. And in this case, we're validating on purchase line, and we'll call it purchase line validate quantity. The function names here don't matter a whole lot from what we're seeing, but later when we look for subscribers, then it would make a little more sense what this description is. So, and again, we're just doing total trading volume, so buying and selling just will tick all that up. So there we go. Cool. And it doesn't matter which happens first, sales or price, an entry gets created. Okay, so at the very least, for the moment, until I untie the Gordian knot I twisted myself into around trying to figure out market valuation and handling and everything like that, until we get there, we are at least going to start recording the market trading activity, so that way we can drive the price up and down on a given day. And this will get us closer to it's functional enough to test drive. So if you haven't already, definitely stop by the GitHub and fill out the Google form if you would like to join in the folks who would like to alpha test with me on these things. And when we're in a place where folks can jump in and start creating test companies and seeing what they can break, then we'll get some people in here. That'll be fun. All right, we didn't quite get all the stuff I wanted. I am going to need to do more with market pricing, but we did technically skip right over market trading history, and we got something done that we weren't planning to have, but we need. So there we go. And I'm going to brainstorm this weekend over what to do on how to handle the market pricing and how do we want to handle item pricing in a way that makes sense. Do we want to let players change the prices and then have the market price, player price variance taking things into account? Do I want to, how do we want to approach that? I won't restate the whole puzzle, but anyways, okay, well, I think that's a decent wrap up. Like I said, I'll do a time lapse of copying all that logic over to the sales side, because I think that'll make sense. We'll wrap up the market pricing in our next episode, and we need to come back to finishing up the bot templates and the purchasing process for buying bots. We still need very much to have players be charged for the power usage of bots and locations. And then we have the seed. The seed will be started on. Actually, it'll be minimally playable at that point. So we're getting there. Not as quick as any of us would like, but we're getting there. So thank you all for watching today. And if you're watching or live or in recording today, then have a pleasant weekend. Take care, everybody.